Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Shirley Weber, and I'm truly honored to be your graduation speaker, to be here today at the African American graduation ceremony for Peralta College. And I'm honored that you've asked me to come and to say a few words, very few words, about the importance of what you're doing and the importance of your civic engagement in California. It's interesting that you're having a Black graduation. I think 43 years ago, I started the Black Baccalaureate at San Diego State University, and it's still going strong. And I started it because I wanted to emphasize the importance of education in African American communities. Some communities take for granted that their students will graduate from college, that they'll be able to open the world and have all the things in life afforded them. But that's not always true in African American communities. And I can remember every time I graduated, every time any member of my family graduated, my father would take off from work and lose a half day's pay for every high school graduation. And when I went to college, that was the highest thing that he ever did, was to attend my graduation, particularly in my PhD. And it just made him so proud, because these were things that he had been denied his whole life. So we never take it for granted. Our community doesn't. And a celebration of your graduation is not just about you, but about the long journey for the last 400 years to excellence for African American communities. And so I'm honored to be with you this morning as you celebrate your achievement at Peralta College. The most important thing we can do right now in terms of what we're doing, not only in educating ourselves, but basically being civically engaged. As your California Secretary of State, I took this job because I realized that this nation was in peril, and that we were somehow losing our ability to define ourselves and direct ourselves and make sure that our futures were secure. My parents never got a chance to vote because of Jim Crow laws in Arkansas when they lived in Arkansas. And it wasn't until my father was well off into his 30s and the father of 6 children that he actually had a chance to cast his ballot and vote. And he voted in every election once he came to California. And in fact, our family became a voting poll for the precinct area that we lived, because he wanted to make sure that everyone had access to voting, that they would go into places that were welcoming, and that their vote would be secured and counted. And that was his contribution, because he knew the value of voting. He knows what happens when you're denied the right to vote. And he also knows what happens when you don't have anything to vote for. And so as a result, I want to encourage you all today to think very seriously about where you are in this nation and what your responsibilities are. I would have never thought years ago that the most significant issue we have right now would be the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Our ancestors fought to get that right, not just to vote, because we already had the right to vote that was in the 1800s. But what we had to do was make sure that no one would block us from voting, that there would not be laws created to keep us from going to the polls. And so the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had a profound impact on the southern states. It removed the things like poll taxes and literacy tests and all those artificial barriers that kept people from African American, particularly, from voting in this nation. And it opened up the opportunity, and we saw the increase in people voting. We saw the increase of folks being elected to office at cities that once had majority African Americans can now vote and pick their mayors and their city council individuals in southern states. And we saw the empowerment of African Americans, and it increased the number of persons in Congress and across this nation. It gave us a voice. It gave us what we had been wanting all of these years, the ability to protect ourselves from unjust laws. And so when I sit and I think about all of the things we struggle for, those things are really important, and they become the issues right now in this nation that we have to fight for. There are many, many laws out there now where people are trying to make it harder for us to get to the polls, harder for us to vote. And I'm fortunate that I'm in California, where we have worked to make it easier for people to vote. We've worked to make sure that everyone gets a ballot in the mail. We made it easy for you to register to vote by simply going online and registering to vote. You can even vote the day, you can even register the day of the election. So we've made it possible to happen. And as a result, we've seen the increase in those who are registered to vote to over 80% of Californians who are eligible are registered to vote. The last election, we saw over 81% of people actually turn out to vote who were registered. That's an amazing feat. And yet we still know that we're missing a number of us who are not going to the polls, who are not exercising their right to vote, and are not using the power that has been given to them. You are our present and not just our future. I want to say to those of you who are graduating, sometimes we talk about you in the future tense, that you're going to be, that you're going to have these things. I'm saying to you right now, you have it. At Peralta College, those of you who are students, you have the right to vote, and you have the power to vote, and you must use that power to protect yourself and to protect your families and those around you. It is important that you look at that and understand where we are. I'm forever confronted with the issues across the nation about all the things that are being done right now in 2022 to stop us from voting. All of the laws that are there to say you can't give a person a glass of water who's standing in line, even if it's hot, that you can't take more than 2 ballots to the polling place because maybe you took your mother's and your grandmother's, and you surely can't take your aunt and yours. So here we are restricting access to voting. Why? Because people are voting, because they're voting in great numbers. They never thought of those laws and those rules and regulations when we only showed up in 30 and 40%. But when they saw what happened in Georgia, when they see what's happening in California, when they see what's happening across this nation, when African Americans are feeling empowered, moving forward, you have a vice president who's an African American woman, you have an African American woman going on the Supreme Court now. You're talking about the other day that we have an African American woman and an LGBT woman who is now going to be the voice of the president and in press conferences. And so when we began to look at the achievements we had, the only thing they can do to stop us is to try to create laws against our ability to exercise our power to vote. I want to challenge you to challenge those laws, to challenge those efforts to stop us. By what? By registering to vote and voting in great numbers. Even those 16 and 17 can pre-register to vote and be prepared at 18. But those of you at Peralta College, you've got it. You've got the power. You've got the ability to vote and to make a difference. I often say to young people that education is extremely important. Voting is extremely important because those are the power that we have to affect our lives and affect the lives of our families. You know, voting is democracy at work. When you think about it, it doesn't matter that I'm Secretary of State and I have all these degrees from UCLA and whatever else it might be. But I get, in a democracy, I get one vote. The president gets one vote. Elon Musk, with all of his money, gets one vote. You get that same one vote. Do not give up your power. Do not give up your influence to anyone. Because when you do not vote, when you are not registered and you don't vote, you then increase the power of those around you. The numbers change, the issues change, and as a result, you no longer become a voice for yourself, but you have to rely upon others to speak for you. So I want to challenge you today as you accept this, your graduation, as you participate in your celebration, celebrate your ancestors. Celebrate that long journey from slavery to emancipation to full enfranchisement of vote, and now celebrate the fact that their legacy is being challenged and that you plan to make sure that what they fought for, that we still have the right to vote, and that you will exercise it to the maximum, and that you will make sure that every member of your family takes advantage of voting. I'm Dr. Shirley Weber. I'm your California Secretary of State. I believe very strongly in the power to vote. I have voted in every election since I turned 21 years old, and those were the ages when we were allowed to vote. And I have voted in every election, small and large. And I ask you to join me in controlling your life, your future, and the future of your families by registering and voting. Thank you so very much, and congratulations.